This is one method that I have always used and it has always worked for me. So if you came from Facebook, trust me on this one, like I said earlier, you would definitely learn something if you follow the same process. And if this is your first time of seeing this channel and this video, you're welcome to this page. I'll be sharing with you today on how to cut a very simple trouser that fits perfectly on your body irrespective of your size. With that being said, don't forget to subscribe, like and share this video. Okay, so let's get started. So for my waistband, you can use 2 inches, but I'm going to be using 1.5 inches. So I'm going to be placing my tape on that 1.5 inches. I'll go ahead to take my full length measurement. Now the full length measurement I am working with is 38 inches. Now I'm going to be adding extra 5 to 6 inches to it for fullness. Okay, now after sewing, you can decide to reduce it if it is too much, but preferably it is better you add it. Okay, now I'll go ahead to mark it and cut it out. Okay, so I'll still go ahead to place my tape on that 1.5 inches because that is for the band. Now I'll go ahead to measure to my hip line, and to my hip line is measuring 9 inches. Now I'll go ahead to measure to my crotch length, which is 11 inches. Now to get your crotch length, go ahead to divide your round hip measurement by 4. Okay, now this is my hip and this is my crotch length measurement. Now on that crotch length measurement, I'm going to be dividing my round hip measurements by 4. I'm going to add 1 inches to it for sewing allowance. Now you can add like extra 1.5 inches depending on what you want. Now I'll extend the same measurements I marked there all the way to the hip line and also to the waistline. Now always remember to use your own accurate body measurement. That is when you're going to get the same result. To get your front crotch extension, divide your hip measurement by 20 and go ahead to mark it. After marking it on the hip line, go out by 0.25, and on the waistline, go in by 0.5 inch and mark it. Now what you want to do is to go ahead to connect it from that crotch extension you marked to the 0.25 and up to the waistline like this. You can use your free hand to create the curve like so, or you can use a French curve. From this point, come down by 0.5 inch and then connect it to the waistline on the hip side. It's done to give the trouser a fitting and to help you differentiate the front from the back. So moving forward from that crotch extension to this side, go ahead and measure whatever you have there and divide it by 2, just the way I am doing in this video. Now get the midpoint and mark it. Now I'll go ahead to place my tape back again on that 1.5 inches to take my waist to my knee lines, and I usually mark like 19 and 20 inches. Now after getting my knee length measurement, I'll go ahead to take this measurement and mark it there to get the midpoint. Now after getting the midpoint, I'll divide my round knee measurement by 2. Okay, mine is 22, divided by 2 is 11. Now I'll get the midpoint on that 11 and distribute it equally on both sides, just the way I am doing in this video. Now the same thing I am doing here, I'll also be doing on the lower part of this trouser. I will appreciate if you help me like this video so that YouTube will push it to more people. Now let's continue. On the waistline, I'll be going in by 0.5 inch, and on from that 0.5 inch I'll connect it to the hip line. You can use your ruler or you can use your free hand to do this. Okay, now from that hip line, I'll connect it to my knee length, and the same thing I'll be doing from this crotch part to the knee length. Now I'll go ahead to measure the same thing I explained to us earlier. I'll get the midpoint on the full length of this trouser, divide it by 2 and mark my round knee measurement. The same thing I did on the knee, I am doing on the ankle part. Now I'll go ahead to connect it from the knee down to the floor length of this trouser this way. Now basically I'm done with drafting the front part. I'll go ahead to cut it out and just watch closely and see how I am cutting it. I'm basically following the lines I marked out to cut it. Now I don't want to discourage you from watching this video by telling you to subscribe, share and do all of that, but I would appreciate it if you do that, as this will help this video to go far. Okay, so now I'll go ahead to use the front as a guide to draft out the back. Now before then, from this part, go down by 1.5 inches, as we're going to be using it to extend the back part. And on this other part, you can go in by 1.5 inches, but I'm going to be doing 2 inches. Now after marking both of them, the next thing you want to do is to go ahead to pick the front part and place it back on it, making sure that this part is sitting on that line and this part is also sitting on this line like so. Okay, now go ahead to arrange it. After arranging it, once again, make sure that this part is sitting on this line and the hip line is also sitting on that 2 inches we marked. And if you're working with fabrics like this, always remember to use your hand pins to hold it down so that it will keep it in place. If you're working with Ankara, you really don't need pin, as Ankara does not really move like that. Okay, so now quickly I'll go ahead to extend the crotch and the hip line to the back part, just the way you see me doing this video. Okay, just watch closely at what I am doing. I'll go ahead to extend it out like so. Okay, now after doing that, from that front crotch line where I am touching right now, you'll be going inward by 1 inches. Okay, just go ahead to mark 1 inches there. Now on the waistline, you'll be going in by 2 inches. If you do not have like big butt, you can use 1.5. Okay, now from that 1 inches, you go ahead to divide your round hip measurement by 10 to get your back crotch. Divide your round hip measurement by 10 to get your back crotch. Okay, so now that place where I am pointing, where I mark that 1 inch, go ahead to place one of your hand there and extend the mark inward on the back part of the trouser. Okay, just go ahead to make a dot there. Okay, now after making that dot, raise the front part and then with your ruler go ahead to connect it to that 2 inches I marked. Now using your free hand or a French curve, go ahead to create a curve this way, just the way I am doing or you see me do in this video. Now if you follow this method, trust me, you're going to get a trouser that sits perfectly on you. Now on that part where I went in by 2 inches, we'll go ahead to replace it backward on that part where I am marking on the waistline for the back part, and I'll go ahead to extend the same 2 inches downward to the hip line this way, and also mark the same 2 inches on the crotch length this way. I'll go ahead to connect it with my free hand. You can use your French curve if you want. Now on this part where I came in with 2 inches, I'll be going up by 1 inches. You can do 1.5 at most. Now connect it back to the waistline. Now on the knee length, I'll go ahead to extend the line out and I'll be opening it out with 1 inches for sewing allowance and sewing ease. I'll be doing the same thing on this other part as well. Now the same thing I am marking here, I'll also be marking it at the full length of this trouser. After marking it, I'll go ahead to connect it from the crotch length to the knee length, and also from the hip part, I'll connect it from the hip down to the knee length. Now from that knee length, I'll just extend it downwards straight using the same 1 inch. Some of you might say this is not easy, but trust me, if you take your time to follow this process, it is very easy. So basically, I am done with the drafting and I'll just go ahead to cut it out. Now go ahead to raise this part here and cut out your back crotch. Now after cutting it, go ahead to cut out this back extension that we added like so, and also cut out the front slants that we did earlier. Like I said on Facebook, always remember to work with your own body measurement. If for instance my hip measurement is 42, I am using 42. If your own hip measurement is 40, remember to always use 40. So now I'll go ahead to notch the hip and the crotch line this way. I'll notch it so that when I am joining it, it's very easier for me to identify. Okay, so now we're going to move into the sewing and the joining part, and the first thing we're going to do is to sew this crotch part for both the front and the back. Now I'm going to be showing you detailed here the way I am joining it on my sewing machine. Now after joining the front part, I'll go ahead to stitch the back crotch, and I stitch the back crotch twice, so it's going to be very tight just in case it is. However, stitching it twice is optional. It is just my preference. You can decide to stitch it once, so long as you're stitching it firmly, like you're stitching it tight, it's okay. So basically I'm done with the stitching of both the front and the back parts. Now I'll go ahead to open up the back part first. Now the front part, I'll make sure the right side are facing each other like so. Now I'll place the front on the back part. Now I'll go ahead to get that part where I notch the crotch and the hip line, and I'll pin it this way. Okay, that point where I notched, I'll place both of them together and use my hand pin to hold it down. Now this is to keep it in place and to make it easier for you when joining. Now, even if you're working with Ankara fabric, always remember to pin it as it will make sewing and joining very easy for you. Now, let me show you two methods on how you can use to shape your dress. Okay, so go ahead to divide your round hip measurement by 2. Okay, now mark it and divide whatever you have there by 2. Mark half of it here and the other half there. Or basically, if the fabric is very stretchy like this, go ahead to open it up like very well and then mark it. Now when you mark it, you go ahead to measure whatever you have left there, divide it by 2 and share it equally on both sides. You mark one of it, then pick the other one and mark it on this other part. Okay, but for me, I'm going to be using 0.75 inches as the allowance I added was just like half-inch allowance. Okay, I'm using 0.5 because it is stretchy. Okay, now on the waistline, I'm not really marking anything because I'm going to be using elastic, so I'll just go ahead to stitch it with like 0.5 inches on the waistline and connect it to the hip line down to the full length. Okay, Now go ahead to hold these two parts together and use your hand pin to hold it down, so that when you're joining it, one part is not going to be longer than the other parts. Okay, so if you are not understanding what I am saying, please kindly watch it again so you understand better. Now I'll go ahead to stitch the other side of the hip, and also pick these 2 points like I said earlier. Use your hand pin to hold it down so one does not pass the other one. Go ahead and back stitch it like so. The sewing part is very simple and fast. Okay, so I'm done with stitching the hip part. Now you can go ahead to weave it if you have your weaving machine, but because I'm in a hurry, I was not able to do that. Now we're going to be joining these two parts. We're going to get the midpoint, hold it together, stitch it on this other side, and also stitch it here. After I'm done, I'll go ahead to hem the full length of this trouser and also hem this part. In case you don't understand what I explained earlier, just go ahead to watch closely and see what I will be doing. Okay, so after getting the midpoint, I'll go ahead to stitch it from the center point. I'll stitch it downward. Now always hold the lower part of this trouser together like I explained earlier, and use your hand pin to hold it down. This will help it to be intact. One is not going to be longer than the other, especially when the fabric is very stretchy like mine. Okay, now go ahead to stitch it. After stitching it, turn your fabric and also stitch the other parts like so. Okay, always remember to back stitch that center part, and always remember to use your hand pin to hold this part. Now I took my time to show you this part so you would not miss anything. Now this video is very detailed, so what you want to do is to help me subscribe, share this video so that others will also find it very useful. Now, after you're done stitching, the next thing we're going to do is to hem the lower part of this trouser. After you've measured and you've confirmed your length, go ahead to hem it, and I'll be doing the same thing on the other side of the leg too. Please remember that you can use any sewing machine of your choice. Okay, you can use your manual sewing machine to achieve this. Thank you for watching to this very moment. Now I'm done with stitching everything. Now the last part is just for us to attach the waistband and add elastic to it, and this trouser is ready. Okay, so now the next thing you want to do is to go ahead to get the two midpoints like so. Open it up like this and measure round whatever you have. Okay, go ahead to measure it. After measuring it, you go ahead to cut out whatever you have on fold like this. Okay, now I've gone ahead to cut mine out, and I used 1.5 inches, and I also opened up this part. Okay, now remember the 1.5 inches we removed earlier. Now this is it, we're going to be adding it back. Okay, so now for the elastic parts, the elastic I used is 27.5 inches, and my round waist measurement is 32. So basically I minused like 5 inches to get the elastic I want. Okay, now I'll go ahead to hold these two parts together. I'll fold it like so, take it to my sewing machine and stitch it from that point where I left opened. If you do not get the part, you can just scroll back and you'll see it. Now just go ahead and stitch it round. After stitching it round, you can go ahead to weave it. After weaving it, I'll also be top stitching it, but I did not weave it in this video. The only thing I did was just to top stitch it, just the way I am showing you in this video. Okay, your top stitching it just to keep it in place. Remember that there are different methods on how you can attach elastic to your trouser. This is just one simple method. Okay, now get your office pin and go ahead to insert your elastic into that waistband like so. Now top stitch it after you're done inserting it. Now on the other side as well, also adjust your elastic and go ahead to top stitch it. Okay, now after stitching it, go ahead to place these two parts together to close up the waist of this trouser. Now this was the part where we opened to insert the waistband and also add the elastic to it. So basically that's all. Just go ahead to close up this part. Remember to back stitch it to keep it intact. Now this other center part of this trouser, I'll go ahead to open it up like so and top stitch that elastic part so the elastic does not move and it stays in place. Now basically with this, if you follow the same process and you use your own accurate body measurements, you'll be able to achieve the same result. Okay, don't forget to turn on your post notification to be notified anytime I upload new tutorial. Thank you for watching to this very end. I'll see you in my next